Damian Lillard is officially a member of the Milwaukee Bucks.
There is not a superstar in the league that better fits with Giannis.
To put it simply, you are getting one of the very best half-court shot creators in the NBA. And now you're adding Giannis Antetokounmpo as a pick-and-roll partner with him.
Giannis has never had a pick-and-roll partner like Damian Lillard.
He talked about how he visualized him and Giannis in the two-man game in the pick and roll. How are you going to stop it?
When they won the championship, their pick and roll was Chris Middleton and Giannis. Now you're going to have Giannis and Dame? Man, that is going to be explosive.
Except it wasn't explosive. Year one of the Dame-Giannis two-man game, to put it bluntly, was underwhelming. The two of them started to put it together towards the end of the season, but for a good 3/4 of the year, they just weren't in sync. And there are a multitude of reasons for this. But I think the simplest way to put it ultimately comes down to the fact that they just weren't too familiar with each other's playstyles coming in. And that applies to everyone who thought their pick and roll would be unstoppable from the jump, including myself, because as dominant of a force as Giannis is, he's not a good screen setter. And he never has been. Some people may point to the Giannis and Chris Middleton pick and roll as a way to refute that claim. But in all actuality, Giannis doesn't set good screens for Chris Middleton either. But he doesn't need to, considering how their playstyles mesh, as the Bucks have always used Giannis as a screen slipper more so than a screen setter in any two-man action with Middleton. And the reason they do this is to create an advantage for Giannis at the rim. Because it's not like Chris Middleton is a small, speedy guard who needs this otherworldly screen to get to the rim. He's a bigger, more methodical wing who's an expert at getting to his spots in the mid-range. And because of this, the Bucks know that Chris is going to turn the corner on every two-man action with Giannis, and from there, K-Mid can either leverage his mid-range game to draw help and lob it up to an open Giannis off the slip, or he can create a shot for himself if the help defense commits to stopping Giannis. For example, here's a possession where the Bucks run a zoom action for Chris Middleton to get into two-man with Giannis. Dame goes corner with a DHO to Chris, who immediately engages in pick and roll with Giannis, who notice doesn't even really set a screen here. He quickly tags Spencer Dinwiddie and slips to the basket, while Chris Middleton turns the corner and penetrates just enough to get Anthony Davis out of position before throwing the lob to a wide open Giannis. And again, AD is willing to bite here, given how lethal Chris is in the mid-range. Here's another example. Chris brings the ball up in transition, and Giannis is again going to set this little tag screen that he immediately slips, which forces Kenrich Williams to step up and defend Middleton, while Lindy Waters tries to chase Giannis off the slip. But Waters is too far behind, and Bismack Biyombo stands no chance in help, given Giannis is already moving at full speed, and it results in an easy K-mid lob into a Giannis poster. However, while Antetokounmpo might be able to get away with screening like this for Chris Middleton, he certainly can't always do so for Damian Lillard, because unlike K-mid, Dame is a small guard who thrives on long-range threes and advantageous blow-bys to the basket, meaning he needs someone who can set good screens. So every time Giannis tries to prematurely slip a screen, or just flat out sets a bad one, it can make his chemistry with Dame look a little clunky. Watch here as the Bucks set up a double drag for Dame, using Brook Lopez and Giannis' screeners. BL sets a pretty solid first screen that results in Spencer Dinwiddie trailing the play, which forces Rui Hachimura to then step up and help. Now stop it right here. If Giannis sets a good hard screen, him and Dame can get into a 2-on-1 against Anthony Davis, but instead, Giannis slips too early, and Rui does a good job of sticking with Dame. So instead of creating a 2-on-1, this possession turns into a missed step back. Now here's an example of Giannis just point blank setting a bad screen. He's going to engage in this simple DHO with Dame, and after he hands it off, instead of setting a good hard screen to set up Dame with an open look, Caleb Martin pushes through him like a turnstile and remains glued to Dame for the remainder of the play. So this ends up turning into a contested step back mid-range jumper that's off the mark. And these are just two of many examples of Giannis just not setting good screens for Dame. Which leads us to the Greek Freak's next problem as Dame's pick and roll partner. He's not a floor spacer whatsoever. So if he screens too high out on the perimeter and has no momentum going to the basket, he's really no help to Dame on these possessions. For example, on this play, Giannis comes and sets a screen for Lillard, who immediately gets blitzed near the sideline. So instinctively, Dame dumps it back to Giannis, but because Nikola Vucevic is already in help, and Ayo Dosunmu rotates back to the ball pretty quickly, there's really not an advantage here for Giannis. So he DHOs back to Lillard, Dosunmu gets a hand up, but to Dame's credit, he hits a pretty tough shot here. Literally the next possession down, Milwaukee runs the same thing, and Alex Caruso sees it from a mile away. So he and Ayo force Dame to pick up his dribble on the sideline, before quickly rotating back to Giannis, who again has absolutely no advantage out here. So he DHOs back to Dame again, and Caruso gets a hand up, but again, Dame just continues to do Dame things. However, I don't want you to be completely fooled, because although Giannis isn't a threat from that far out there, he can still punish defenses who play him lazy. Like right here, Dame is going to reject the Giannis screen, and Denver is going to ice him near the sideline. So Dame dishes to Giannis, who squares, but Aaron Gordon isn't biting. But in this moment, Antetokounmpo notices all the room he has to work with, and sees that Denver's help big in Nikola Jokic has his head turned. So he puts the ball on the floor going left to get rid of Jamal Murray's help defense on the right, before quickly spinning past Aaron Gordon and gliding past Jokic to the rim with little resistance. So while the Greek Freak may have his floor spacing deficiencies, he's still smart enough to pick apart an opposing defense if they play him too soft. Alright, now let's take a quick timeout. We've gotten on Giannis quite a bit for his poor screen setting at times and his lack of floor spacing. But a pick and roll works two ways, and Damian Lillard isn't completely innocent either, because I'm of the mindset that the inconsistency of Dame and Giannis' two-man game is more so on Lillard, and it's not completely his fault. I just say that because Dame will dominate the pick and roll depending on Giannis' matchup. For example, remember that game against the Clippers in mid-March, where Dame and Giannis combined for like 70, and their two-man game was better than ever? That's because Dame was confident in exploiting Giannis' matchup that game. Here's a play where Dame brings the ball up, and Giannis comes to set a screen on his man. Although the screen isn't great, it's enough to get Amir Coffey trailing the play, and Dame notices that the help defender is a slower-footed Mason Plumlee. So he pulls back his dribble just ever so slightly to get Plumlee to open his hips, and from there, he slips a dime to Giannis for this easy layup. A couple minutes go by, and Dame is back at it, exploiting the same mismatch. So they run an empty side pick and roll where Dame is again able to get Amir Coffey on his hip. So at that point, all he has to do is turn the corner against Mason Plumlee and throw it up to a wide open Giannis off the slip, which is exactly what he does, and they score. However, for every game Giannis is defended by Mason Plumlee, there's one where he's matched up with Bam Adebayo or Anthony Davis. And in those games, Dame doesn't like to attack the pick and roll with nearly the same amount of urgency given who Giannis' matchup is. For instance, Dame is going to come off a zoom action on the sideline and receive this DHO from Giannis. Jay Crowder sets a pretty good initial screen, so Giannis swiftly slips to the basket after the handoff with Caleb Martin trailing the play. So all Dame needs to do is turn the corner, draw Bam, and lob it up to Giannis, right? Well, instead, he moves laterally and ends up taking a step back jumper that he misses. On this next play, he does make a pretty nice hesitation move, which results in a bucket. But he completely ignored the potential advantage for Giannis at the rim. Milwaukee runs a DHO here near the top of the key, and when Dame comes off, Giannis gives Austin Reeves a little shoulder bump to get him on Dame's back hip before hard rolling to the basket. And from here, again, you go at AD to pull him further away from the basket so you can throw an uncontested lob to Giannis. But instead, Dame steps back and hesitates. So to me, year one of the Giannis-Dame connection looked funky because they just didn't seem to understand each other's playstyles. And there's nothing wrong with that. We've got to remember that the Bucks made the Lillard trade literally a week before last season's training camp, and the superstar duo really had no time to work everything out with each other. And when you combine that with the fact that they played for 3 different head coaches last season, if you include interim Joe Prunty, things are bound to look a little messy. So now that they have half a season, a full offseason, and soon to be a full training camp under Doc Rivers, I fully expect Dame and Giannis' two-man connection to be on display this coming season. And even through all the chaos of last year, the dynamic duo did make strides in their chemistry. For instance, I did see improvement in Giannis' screen setting as the year went on, especially against teams with dropping bigs, because if Antetokounmpo could set a good enough screen, it would free Dame up for wide open three-point looks, which is exactly what you want against that style of defense when you have a long-range sniper as lethal as Lillard. And even away from the ball, both of them were better at understanding the spacing they both needed to be at their best. On this play, the Bucks looked to be getting into one of their double drags, but after Brook Lopez's screen, Najee Marshall is completely behind this play. So instead of setting a second screen, Giannis is going to clear out to the perimeter and bring his man with him to clear the lane for this Lillard layup. And on this play, it's Dame returning the favor. Notice how Giannis comes off this Brook Lopez screen and is immediately met with a wall of 3 Grizzlies defenders. Dame recognizes this and empties out to the weak side of the floor, taking Zaire Williams with him in the process. And this gives Giannis enough room to reset and essentially treat this as an ISO against Santi Aldama, as he sizes him up, spins, and Euros past Lamar Stevens and help to finish at the rim. And again, this is simply Dame and Giannis having a better understanding of each other's playstyle, which is something that's going to continue to grow from here. So now, the only question is, what can Doc Rivers do schematically to have Dame and Giannis on the same page? Well, I've taken the liberty of figuring out some of the duo's most effective actions, and here's the list I came up with. Empty side pick and rolls and DHOs, sideline out of bounds plays, transition game, and inverted pick and rolls. Starting with empty side pick and rolls and DHOs. This is just spacing 101. The idea is to get everyone on the weak side of the floor, except for the 2 players running the pick and roll action. Doc Rivers oftentimes loves starting games with this later in the season, presumably to get Giannis and Dame on the same page right away. Here they are against the Warriors. First play. Giannis comes to set a screen for Dame, but he hardly makes any contact with Andrew Wiggins, who gets over with ease, and Draymond Green is going to help in this flat hedge to force Dame towards the sideline. Dame then picks up his dribble and gives it back to Giannis at the top of the key. They both take a moment and immediately go back into a DHO. But this time, Giannis gives Wiggins enough of a bump off the handoff to where Dame can get him on his back hip and force Draymond Green to step out ever so slightly that it opens up this slip pass for Giannis to then finish over the smaller defender with no additional help on the backside. Same thing here a couple of nights later against LA. Dame's gonna go DHO with Giannis and get it back on the sideline. Dame's then gonna jab as Giannis slips the screen. Dame comes off and rises as he's about to shoot to deceive AD into stepping up before dishing it back to Giannis, who has no trouble getting around Austin Reeves for 2. Nextly, we have the Bucks sideline out of bounds plays, which are very similar to the empty side pick and rolls we discussed because most of them have the same premise: to isolate Dame and Giannis on the strong side of the floor. Sticking with that same Laker game, the Bucks are sideline out of bounds, up 2 under a minute to go, with just over 4 seconds left on the shot clock. Doc Rivers opts to have Damian Lillard inbound, so he can initiate a 2-man action with Giannis upon entry. But first, watch as Malik Beasley is going to cut over Giannis and clear to the weak side to give the superstar duo the spacing they need. From here, It's a simple DHO, and because there's virtually no time on the shot clock, AD is convinced Dame is going to shoot this three. So he jumps, contests, but at the very last second, Dame is going to pass it out into a Giannis floater. On this next play, Dame inbounds to Giannis high post, and Jay Crowder immediately flashes to set a screen for Dame on this zoom action. Dame then receives the DHO and comes off with Derrick Jones Jr. trailing the play and Maxi Kleber showing. Giannis slips and doesn't get tagged by Luka in help, so Dame notices that and threads the needle to Giannis for this easy slam. And then just for fun, here's a baseline out of bounds play that I liked under Adrian Griffin. Again, Lillard is the inbounder, so he can get the ball back. He throws into Chris Middleton high post and comes off these staggered screens into a wide open three-point look. This leads us to the transition game, where I mainly just want to talk about Giannis' ability to get down the floor. Throughout his entire career, the Greek Freak has always been good about beating the defense down the floor and establishing early interior positioning for easy lobs. And with a playmaker like Dame by his side, this only becomes easier for Giannis if he can continue to do it. Here he is early shot clock, literally a minute into the game, beating Santi Aldama down the floor, establishing position, and getting a half-court lob from Dame. Same thing here. Early shot clock, Giannis sprints down the floor to the low post, establishes inside positioning against Cody Martin, and this is the easiest lob pass of Dame's life. The Bucks also like to run some empty side pick and roll and drag concepts in transition as well. Here, Dame and Giannis run an empty side in transition before Philly can even set their defense, and it results in Giannis completely burning Tobias Harris off the slip and finishing with this uncontested lob because Mo Bamba forgot to help. On this play, they run a double drag concept where Dame comes off with the cleanest of looks, but he just can't convert. But probably my favorite drag concept in transition is for Giannis. Watch as Dame comes down the floor and motions for AJ Green to empty out to the weak side corner. The Bucks then line up in double drag with Bobby Portis and Giannis. Dame comes off the first screen, Justin Holiday's trailing, so Bobby Portis pops out to the three-point line, which forces Nikola Jokic to play up a little bit higher, thus opening up the opportunity for Giannis to slip behind Aaron Gordon, who is also forced to step up ever so slightly because Dame's coming off the roll. And the spacing on this play makes this a seamless alley-oop for Dame and Giannis. Which leads us to the final action I'd like to discuss, the inverted pick and roll. An action the Bucks didn't run nearly enough, if you ask me. The concept of an inverted pick and roll is simple. The idea is to get the ball to your dominant big, high post, free throw line extended, and from there, a guard is going to come down from the wing and use his defender to set a brush screen on the big's defender, thus freeing up the big to drive to the basket. I saw the Bucks run that maybe 4 times with Giannis and Dame under Doc, which is mind-blowing considering how effective it is. Here, we can see Giannis with the rock in the high post. Watch as Dame slowly creeps down from the wing, taking his defender Bones Highland with him before subtly pushing him into Giannis' defender Ivica Zubats to create this little brush screen, which gives the Greek Freak all the room in the world to get to the basket. They tried to run this same play earlier in the game to no succession, but I think it would have worked had one thing changed. Dame is again going to come down from the wing and set this little brush screen on Mason Plumlee, but it's not as effective. So instead of creating an open lane like it did in the other clip, it forces a switch. And from here, all Giannis really needs to do is spin, and he has a layup against a smaller defender. But Jay Crowder makes a crucial mistake, and he cuts to the basket on the weak side. Norman Powell points this out to Terrence Mann and communicates a switch after Malik Beasley lifted to the wing. So now, instead of spinning into an openish lane, Giannis spins right into Terrence Mann's help defense because Jay Crowder brought him right under the basket. This last play I'm going to show you more so displays what it looks like when teams overload the Giannis drive and ignore Damian Lillard off the pop. So here they are working from a sideline out of bounds. Jay Crowder throws it into Giannis near the top of the key and immediately empties to the weak side, which makes it look like Giannis and Dame are going to run their patented sideline DHO. But instead, Dame is going to set this brush screen for Giannis by pushing Vince Williams into Santi Aldama, which immediately puts the Grizzlies' entire defense into rotation. Because their goal is simple. They want to wall Giannis off from the paint. And boom, there it is. Trey Jamison steps up. So Giannis just kicks this back out to a wide open Damian Lillard. He just so happens to miss. But the look was certainly there. So when watching all of that film, we now know the good, bad, and ugly of the Dame Giannis two-man game. And luckily for Bucks fans, they really started to click towards the end of the season. So I have no doubt that they'll be on the same page once the 2024-25 season tips. And maybe the scariest part of their two-man game being in sync is the spacing it's going to create for everyone else. For example, first play of the game, Dame drives baseline, triggering Malik Beasley to empty. He then comes off this Giannis screen, free throw line extended, forcing literally Dallas's entire defense in rotation. And from here, Chris Middleton is going to cut through to get Josh Green to turn his head, and in the process, creates this little brush screen on Grant Williams. So all Robin Lopez has to do to make this a stagger is screen Beasley's defender in Luka Doncic, which he does, and it results in a wide open look for a 41% three-point shooter. And all of this is possible thanks to the initial Dame and Giannis pick and roll. Here's another example. Dame brings the ball up and is met with what looks to be a double high, but Brook Lopez is going to back off and retreat to the corner. So Giannis flips his screening angle, causing Caruso and Dosunmu to blitz, and Malik Beasley recognizes this and immediately cuts to the wing, knowing that Kobe White has to tag Giannis's role. Lo and behold, he does. The Bulls defense is put in rotation, and Malik Beasley laces this wide open three. Final example I'll show. Giannis splashes baseline to receive a pass from Brook Lopez, and swiftly turns to Dame for a DHO, who comes off the handoff with some urgency, forcing Rui Hachimura to show, and ultimately D'Lo to tag the roll. So when Dame slips this pass to Giannis, D'Lo has to abandon Malik Beasley, who benefits with yet another wide open look. And these are just a few of many different actions in which Dame and Giannis's gravity creates for others. And it wasn't just Malik Beasley. Here's Brook Lopez getting wide open off this drag screen against Portland. So when you factor in that Milwaukee's overall floor spacing improved this offseason with the additions of Gary Trent Jr., Taurean Prince, and DeLon Wright, it'll make their offense that much more dynamic. But all in all, that's just my 2 cents on the Dame Giannis pairing and how the Bucks can further maximize it. I'd love to hear everyone else's thoughts down in the comments section below. But for now, that's all I've got. And I'll see you in the next one.